The Bite of the Mango, Chapter 22. It's February 2008, and I'm back in Sierra Leone with Susan, Katie, a woman from UNICEF Canada, and Soria Samura, the filmmaker who made Cry Freetown, a documentary chronicling the brutal January 1999 invasion of Freetown by the rebels. I got the book deal. Susan and I were working on my memoir, and we have returned to Sierra Leone to finish and fact-check the book. It's early in the morning on our second week in the country. Sierra Leone smelled just like I remembered. The air thick with aromas of open fire, spices, and the ocean, and bright like a soft fluorescent light. I'm in Freetown. I crawled out of bed, opened the window, leaned out, and inhaled. Just as I was about to turn and wake up Katie, my cell phone rang. "Hello," I said after digging it out of my purse. It was Soria Samura. On the other end, "You're going to meet the president tomorrow," she said. The phone was crackling, and I wasn't sure I had heard him correctly. "I don't understand," I replied. "What did you say?" "Mariatu, I've arranged for you to meet the president tomorrow. The president of Sierra Leone." As Cyrus went on to give me details of the meeting with President Ernest Bai Koroma, including how I should present myself to the leader of my native country, I thought back to the time nearly 9 years ago when I had first heard the word president. "Mariatu, are you listening to me?" Cyrus' voice broke into my thoughts. "Yes," I said. "I've been listening, but I don't see how I can meet the president." "All you have to do is tell him your story," Cyrus said gently. "Can you do that?" "I will think about it," I whispered after a long pause. "I will try to remember." After my conversation with Cyrus, I didn't feel like talking to anybody. I was too worried. What could I possibly say to the president? Why would he want to listen to me? Susan and Katie and I were going to Yonkro to visit my family. I had to get bathed and dressed, or else we wouldn't make it to the village until midday. Katie was awakened at the sound of the phone, and as she stumbled to the bathroom, she asked me who it was. "Cyrus," I replied. "He says we're meeting the president tomorrow." "Good," Katie said as she shut the door to the washroom. "He went to school with my brother. It will be nice to see him again," she called out nonchalantly. I then heard the sound of water running. For a moment I laughed, thinking that everyone in Sierra Leone is either related to Katie or Abu, or knows them. But then my mind returned to the actual meeting with the president. Even the president, being a friend of Katie's brother, did little to soothe my nerves. I said barely a word all the way to Yonkro. I was still mulling over Sorrow's call when we reached the tiny village outside Lunzer. As we got off the bus, the village children and a few women sang a song of welcome. "Mariatu, Mariatu, is that you?" I swung around at the sound of my grandmother's voice. She was shuffling her way down the dirt road in an Africana wrap skirt and baby blue headscarf. She had aged so much since I'd last seen her. Her face was wrinkled, her eyes sunken, and several of her teeth were missing. I realized she was using a long stick in her hands, not only to prop herself up, but to feel her way. "I'm here, grandmother," I called back, taking off and running into her arms. We embraced, and then my grandmother clutched my face with her hands. "I never thought you'd come back," she cried. "But you did." "I wanted to surprise everyone, grandmother." Her brown eyes appeared blue, because of what I learned were cataracts. Cataracts could be fixed easily in Canada, but not for poor people in Sierra Leone. I realized my grandmother was now blind. I hadn't told anyone I was coming home. A month earlier, I used part of the advance from my book deal to buy a ship to Sierra Leone, a crate full of clothes, shoes, toothpaste, soap, and umbrellas. I talked to Marie and Aline on the telephone since then, but I'd given no hint that I was about to see them for the first time since I left 6 years before. I didn't want them to go out of their way preparing big feasts or using the little money they had to take a minibus to greet me in Freetown. I wanted to spoil them instead. We worked our way through the crowd of singers, and I led my grandmother to a small wooden bench by the side of my mother's hut. 4 puppies snuggled up against our feet. I laid my head on my grandmother's lap the way I had when I was a little girl. As she stroked my hair and asked me about my life in Canada, I told her about Katie and Abu and how much they had done for me. I broke into tears as I lifted my head and looked into her glossy eyes. Grandmother, I've been wanting to tell you something for a very long time. Remember how you told me that dreaming of palm oil means blood will spill by the end of the day? Yes, she said. I had such a dream that night before the rebels came. Tell me your dream, she said. Over the next hour or so, I let everything out. I told my grandmother about my dream, about the rebels, about the boy's face. I told her about the rape and about a duel and how even to that day I blame myself for his death. I told her about the amputee camp and begging, and about going to London and then Toronto. When I stopped talking, my grandmother and I sat there in the shade, listening to some rooster crow. Some of the village kids were playing a game of hide and seek, while 2 boys pushed a metal tire rim around with sticks. What would you have done if you'd been in Monarma with me? I asked my grandmother. If I had been there the morning of your very bad dream, she said after a pause, I would have done what was a customary. I'd have cast a spell to make those demons go away. What kind of spell, grandmother? We would have gone to the lake together and thrown a big rock into the middle of the still waters, she said. We would have asked the spirits around us to leave those demons in our heads and not let them take the use of the rebels. So you would have believed me? I asked. Yes, she said. But Mariatu, many things have changed because of the war, and witchcraft can't change the past. I wish a spell could have stopped the attack on you, but you have turned your hurt and pain into something positive. When those demons reappeared, think about all the angels who have come into your life since then. Solomon was one of those angels, as were Fatmata, Katie, Adamsi, Abibatu, Muhammad. The list goes on. When it was Christmas time in Canada, Solomon had died. One morning, he had woken up and had difficulty breathing. He wheezed and coughed and couldn't pull himself out of bed. He hadn't gone into the shop or kept in Freetown, selling needles, thread, and biscuits. Instead, he lay on his back all day. His wife, Mariatu, soaked his brow with a damp cloth. Solomon's breathing became more labored, and a shooting pain ran up and down his arms. Mariatu tried to feed him using a big wooden spoon, but in the end his heart failed. I was very sad to hear this news. Solomon was no more than 30 years old when he died, but he had spent all his money on medicine for my cousins and me after the rebel attack. He had no savings to pay for the doctor or the medication he needed. When I learned of Solomon's death, I offered to pay for the 40-day funeral ceremony. In Sierra Leone, we mourn the dead with festivities at the time of burial and again at the 40th day and 1 year marks. Solomon's body was buried in Yonkro, where he and my father, Marie, and Abibatu had been raised. He was buried alongside my father, who had died from old age while I was living in Canada. Leaving my grandmother, I slipped down the alleyway between 2 grass huts and came out into an open space, where women were cooking rice and boiling chicken in huge pots over several open fires. Mariatu was there, dressed from head to toe in black to indicate she was in mourning. A few women were rolling rice and sugar, making a dessert that is common in Sierra Leone. I handed one of the balls to Mariatu. I'm sorry for your suffering, I said, looking down. Mariatu answered as if she knew the guilt I was carrying. Solomon never regretted helping you, she said kindly. Never once. Over the years, my mother had given birth to 10 children. She was still young-looking, but thin, too thin. Her Africana skirt was dirty, and her t-shirt was torn on one shoulder. I felt self-conscious in my silver hoop earrings and new white, blue, and pink Africana docket and lampa that Katie had bought for me in Freetown to wear to Solomon's funeral. My younger sister, Mabinti, and I had never met, but any onlooker would have known we were siblings. I looked into my own brown eyes when my mother introduced us and saw my own smile spread across her 8-year-old face. We laughed as we threw our arms around each other. A minute later, though, Mabinti was crying. I'm sick, Mariatu, she sobbed. I can't breathe, just like Salman. Sometimes I have to stay in the hut all day, not moving. I wonder if Mabinti had asthma, something I knew about from living in the West. In this remote village, halfway between Port Loko and Lonzar and well off the main road, I was sure she had never seen a doctor. Her life was probably just like mine had been before 1999, before the rebels. Mabinti dried her tears and she showed me around the village. Before she was born, she said, rebels had burned down all the huts in Yonkro. The village men had rebuilt the place one clay brick at a time. Back in the center of the village, we sat down in the shade of a hut to listen to the traveling imam who was reciting verses from the Quran to mark Solomon's passing. It's better to have of goat and chicken than to give birth to a girl, the imam said to the 10 men sitting in a circle around him. I rose to rejoin the women. Many things have changed, grandmother, I thought. But some things remain the same. As the day wore on in Yonkro, I grew increasingly quiet. My mind was turning over everything that I was seeing. My family's ripped and dirty clothes, the sadness in their eyes, the wilted stems on their crops. Now that the rainy season creeps upon them for only a few weeks each year rather than a few months because of global warming, I hadn't noticed any of this when I lived in Sierra Leone. But now I lived in a place where many families drove 2 cars, bought new clothes every month, and dined out at restaurants regularly. En route back to Freetown, I gazed out the window at the elephant grasses and swaying mango trees. I thought of Ibrahim, who was now living in Ghana, trying to find work. With no luck, Adamsi was still in the little village outside Masaka, now mother to a 5-year-old named Khadija. Adamsi had never left Sierra Leone. No non-profit group ever approached her again, and she sold any extra produce from her small farm on the side of the main road. She wanted to send her daughter to school, but didn't have the money for a tuition or a uniform. Not once, though, she had complained to me about her life. I miss you so much, she said when we saw each other. I hope you have been doing what Marie asked of you, to always look forward. As the main road became congested with boys on motorcycles and women and children selling mangoes, coconuts, and plantains from big bowls they carried on their heads, I asked the minibus driver to stop at Waterloo, a small suburb of Freetown, where I wanted to visit Mohammed. Mohammed, like everyone else, was flabbergasted to see me. He had a quizzical expression on his face at first. I didn't think he had changed that much, but my hair had been woven into a sleek shoulder-length style, and it was a little heavier than when I'd last seen him. I was wearing nice clothes, too, not tattered hand-me-downs from Father Marizo. Yes, it's me, I said, laughing. He grabbed my arm, pulling me into a long hug. Mohammed looked so toned that if he lived in North America, I'd have teased him that he had to be going to the gym every day. His wide smile, as always, showed off his perfect white teeth. Mohammed's eyes sparkled as he plopped his 4-month-old daughter, Safia, onto his lap. She was dressed in a crisp blue cotton dress with a matching bow in her hair. I fell in love, he said, beaming. Can you believe it? I couldn't believe it. In my heart, Mohammed will always remain that joking older cousin who used to pull my hair and steal my food. Mohammed lived in one of the small cement huts that a foreign non-profit group had donated to some victims of the war. He showed me around the Waterloo suburb, which had been a displaced persons camp for amputees like Aberdeen during the war. Litter lined the ground like a carpet. Tin cans and the carcasses of dead dogs and cats filled the sewage ditches. I'm still begging at the clock tower, Mohammed told me, but we don't make as much as before. There are so many of us on the streets that business people usually just walk on past. The girls and boys coming home from school in their uniforms spit on us. Uncharacteristically, Mohammed turned bitter as Sorius, who had joined us, began filming. They used us, he hissed. The government used the kids at Aberdeen to gain media and money from foreign countries. We've seen none of it. This is all we have. He swept his arms to indicate the huts. The one-room buildings were sheltered from the biting sun and by mango trees, but Waterloo was nowhere near any farmland, and it was a half a day's walk to get to downtown Freetown and the clock tower. 4 years earlier, several members of the theater troupe had organized a march, shutting down the streets of Freetown for a whole day. They held up placards demanding that the president listen to their stories. "We need education, a shot at life," the posters read. Many amputees took part, including Muhammad. In fact, he had been in the march's front line, linked arm in arm with other amputees, as the 1,000-strong crowd rounded the corner toward the presidential palace. Nothing happened, he told us angrily. The government did nothing, just watched us screaming out to be heard. He stopped speaking for a moment. "You know, the kids around here play war games. They pretend to shoot and kill the rebels who cut off their parents' hands. Turn around, Mariatu," he said softly. "Return to Canada and don't look back." In Freetown, Katie, Susan, and I played at the Bearmoy, a brand new hotel filled with Western comforts, including a laundry service, television, air conditioning, and a restaurant serving pizza and spaghetti. The hotel was gated with at least 4 uniformed Sierra Leoneans standing guard at any given time. Surrounding the building was a tall cement wall topped with barbed wire. A week before our arrival, soccer superstar David Beckham had stayed at the hotel as part of his UNICEF visit. Now this place was full of middle-aged men with Australian, American, and British accents. They're there to work with the many charities in Freetown or to advise the government on how to enforce the payment of taxes. Since being in Sierra Leone, I had learned that our country ranks at the bottom of the United Nations Human Development Index. The first week of my visit home involved my touring with UNICEF to see the organization's projects in the eastern region of the country. I met with many poor Sierra Leoneans. I held their babies, I laughed, and I cried. I learned that fewer kids go to school in Sierra Leone than in any other country in the world. Sierra Leone has the lowest life expectancy of any country, with adults lucky to live until they're 40, compared to Canada, where people can live to 90 and still be healthy. Sierra Leone has few income-generating exports or commodities. The country has lots of resources, as I had learned from Yabam, including diamonds, butite, gold, iron ore, or manganese, as well as fresh water and fishing. Foreigners reap most of the profits, though. If we were all millionaire, I thought, I'd hire a minibus and pick up Muhammad, Mabinti, Adamsi, Meminatu, Marie, Ali, Ibrahim, and my grandmother, and all the elders, and put them on an airplane to Toronto. But I'm not. So how can I best help my family? How can I be of help to the people of Sierra Leone? Ismail's book had inspired me to tell my story. When I heard him say during his Toronto speech, "What we need to hear next is the story of a girl from the war," I got excited. I felt I had found my purpose. I can contribute by telling the world about war, about family, about being a girl in Sierra Leone, but now a part of me wanted to take Muhammad's advice and run far, far away, never again to return. My story was just one of thousands in Sierra Leone. What made it any different from anyone else's. Another part of me wanted to stay in Sierra Leone with my family, living in Yonkro or the tiny village outside Maseka. If war had never come to my life, I might still be in Megbaru, married to a boy named Musa. I was very confused after visiting my grandmother Muhammad. I walked outside and flopped down on one of the chairs around the hotel's sparkling swimming pool. After a minute, a tiny bird sitting on top of the trellis caught my attention. It was brown and yellow, like the bird that had fallen from the sky that day back in Megbrew. "What should I do?" I asked the little weaver. As the bird chirped 3 times and flew off, I remembered my flight after the rebel attack, my long walk alone in the bush, my close calls with barking dogs and spitting cobras. I saw the haggard face of the man who had led me to the clay road in Port Loco. I could see his shaking hands as he passed me the mango to eat. I knew then what I had to do. I may not have hands, but I have a voice. And no matter how nice my home is in Canada, my first home will always be Sierra Leone. My heart of my country is the heart of the people who helped me see myself not as a victim, but as someone who could still do great things in this world. I stood up, walked to my second floor room, and opened my suitcase. I pulled out a formal red and gold African outfit that Katie had made for me in Toronto. I smoothed out the creases and then pulled out of my travel bag a small box containing a pair of dangling gold earrings. Yes, I said out loud. Even though the room was empty, I will meet the president tomorrow. I will speak for all the people of Sierra Leone who are not being heard. Something in me had changed. I knew now that I could look forward and back without any regrets. At the same time,